There's a reason Netanyahu visits Trump's private clubs so often, and it has nothing to do with golf. The intelligence reports I've uncovered show a nuclear secret that could change the entire Middle East. What happened in that underground bunker at Mar-a-Lago? The truth is more terrifying than you imagine. It was 2:30 a.m. when the encrypted phone buzzed in Netanyahu's private residence. The caller ID showed only numbers, no name, no country code that any intelligence agency could trace. But Netanyahu knew exactly who it was. This wasn't their first clandestine conversation, and it certainly wouldn't be their last. "We need to meet." Trump's voice was unusually tense, stripped of his characteristic bravado. "Tonight, the usual place." The usual place. Those two words carried weight that could reshape global politics. Because what I'm about to reveal will show you that their relationship goes far deeper than public diplomacy, deeper than even their closest advisors ever suspected. But first, you need to understand how this nuclear conspiracy began. It started 3 years ago, during what appeared to be a routine diplomatic visit. Netanyahu had flown to Florida, under the guise of attending a private fundraising event. The media reported it as another example of their strong alliance. What they didn't know was that beneath Mar-a-Lago's opulent facade lay something that officially doesn't exist. Have you ever wondered why Trump chose Mar-a-Lago as his primary residence after leaving office? Why a man obsessed with Manhattan real estate would retreat to a Florida club? The answer lies 47 feet underground, in a facility that cost more to build than most countries' entire defense budgets. The construction began in 2019 disguised as routine renovations to the club's wine cellar. But wine cellars don't require electromagnetic fuel. They don't need air filtration systems designed to tide chemical attacks. And they certainly don't require the type of security clearances that only exist in black budget operations. What was Trump really building down there? The answer would make your blood run cold. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to that night when everything changed. Netanyahu's convoy arrived at Mar-a-Lago through the service entrance, avoiding the main gates where paparazzi occasionally lurked. His security detail was unusually small, just 3 men instead of the usual 12. This wasn't about protecting Israel's prime minister. This was about maintaining plausible deniability for what was about to unfold. The elevator that took them down didn't appear on any building schematic. 47 feet below the Florida coastline, past multiple security checkpoints that would make Fort Knox look like a tourist attraction, they entered a room that exists in no official record. But what they discussed in that room, that's where this story takes a terrifying turn. The documents spread across the titanium table told a story that neither man's governments knew. Satellite images from undisclosed locations. Technical specifications written in languages that most nuclear physicists couldn't understand. And at the center of it all, a blueprint that would make the Manhattan Project look like a high school science experiment. "Phase 3 is ready," Netanyahu said, his voice echoing in the sterile chamber. "But we need your assurance that Washington will look the other way when what? What was Phase 3? And why would Israel's staunchest ally need to look the other way?" The answer lies in what Trump pulled from his jacket pocket that night. A USB drive containing information so sensitive that its very existence violates 17 international treaties. Information that came from a source neither man could acknowledge publicly. Because that source? It was someone who officially died 3 years ago. Dr. Mordecai Vanunu had supposedly been silenced permanently after exposing Israel's nuclear program in the 1980s. The world believed he was living under strict surveillance, unable to travel or speak. But what if I told you that was all an elaborate deception? What if Vanunu had been secretly working for both Israeli and American intelligence all along? The files Trump handed Netanyahu that night contained something that would rewrite everything we know about nuclear proliferation in the Middle East. Technical details of a weapon system that doesn't just threaten military targets, it threatens the very fabric of modern civilization. But here's where the story gets truly disturbing. The weapon wasn't being built in Israel. It wasn't being built in America. It was being constructed in a location so unexpected, so seemingly impossible, that when you learn the truth, you'll understand why both men were willing to risk everything to keep it secret. Remember those routine diplomatic visits Netanyahu made to various countries over the past 3 years? The ones that seemed random, almost pointless from a strategic perspective? There was nothing random about them. Each location was carefully chosen for one specific purpose. Venezuela, North Korea, Iran. Yes, Iran. The country both men publicly threatened was secretly their most crucial partner in this operation. Because sometimes the greatest enemies make the most convenient allies when the stakes are high enough. What did they build together? What weapon could be so powerful that Netanyahu and Trump would risk their political careers, their legacies, their very freedom to possess it? The answer is something called Project Samson, named after the biblical figure who brought down the temple upon himself and his enemies. Project Samson represents a new category of nuclear weapon. Not designed to win wars but to ensure that certain wars can never be fought. A weapon so devastating that its very existence changes the fundamental balance of global power. But the terrifying part isn't what this weapon can do, it's who controls it. That night in the Mar-a-Lago bunker, Trump and Netanyahu weren't discussing strategy as allies. They were negotiating as rivals, each trying to gain ultimate control over Project Samson. Because whoever controls this weapon doesn't just control the Middle East, they control the world. The Russians are getting suspicious, Trump said, sliding another document across the table. Putin's people are asking questions we can't answer much longer. Putin knew. Of course he knew. You don't move that much enriched uranium without someone noticing, but what Putin didn't know was that the weapon being built wasn't designed to threaten Russia. It was designed to threaten something far more valuable: the global financial system itself. Project Samson wasn't just a nuclear weapon. It was an electromagnetic weapon capable of wiping out every computer system, every satellite, every piece of electronic infrastructure within a radius that spans continents. In a world where money exists as digital data, where governments rely on electronic communications, where modern civilization depends on computer networks, such a weapon represents ultimate power. But here's the twist that neither Trump nor Netanyahu saw coming. The third partner in Project Samson had been playing them both from the beginning. While they thought they were building a weapon to cement their power, someone else was planning to use it for purposes that would horrify them both. That someone was hiding in plain sight, attending their meetings, privy to their most sensitive conversations. Someone whose identity would shock you because they appeared to be the most loyal ally either man had. Jared Kushner. Trump's son-in-law wasn't just facilitating meetings between his father-in-law and Netanyahu, he was building his own network, his own power base, his own plan for Project Samson. Because Kushner had learned something that neither Trump nor Netanyahu knew, there was a fourth partner in this operation. A silent partner who had been funding the project from the shadows. The Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. The man who publicly condemned nuclear proliferation was secretly financing the most dangerous weapon ever conceived. Why? Because he understood something that Trump and Netanyahu had missed in their hunger for power. Whoever controlled Project Samson wouldn't need traditional allies or enemies. They would transcend the entire system of international relations. Nations would become irrelevant. Governments would become obsolete. In a world where one person could shut down global civilization with the push of a button, traditional power structures would crumble. But the Crown Prince had made one crucial miscalculation. Kushner was already 3 steps ahead of everyone. While they were planning to control the weapon, he was planning to control them. The financial networks he had built through his real estate empire weren't just business ventures. They were the infrastructure for a shadow government that would emerge after Project Samson rendered traditional governments powerless. That night in Mar-a-Lago, as Trump and Netanyahu argued over control codes and launch sequences, Kushner was in another part of the facility. Copying files, recording conversations, building a case that would ultimately give him leverage over both men. Because Kushner had realized something terrifying: neither Trump nor Netanyahu could be trusted with that level of power. Trump's impulsiveness and Netanyahu's desperation made them both too dangerous to control a weapon that could end civilization. But Kushner believed he was different. He believed he was rational enough, calculating enough, visionary enough to wield that power responsibly. What he didn't realize was that the very act of seeking such power had already corrupted him beyond recognition. The files he copied that night contained more than technical specifications. They contained evidence of what each man was really planning to do with Project Samson once it was complete. Trump's plan was focused on domestic control. He intended to use the threat of global electromagnetic collapse to force the American political system to accept his permanent return to power. Elections would become irrelevant when one man could shut down the entire electronic infrastructure that modern democracy depends on. Netanyahu's plan was more ambitious. He envisioned using Project Samson to force a complete reorganization of the Middle East. With Israel as the undisputed hegemon, no longer would they need to negotiate with Houston, Iranians or anyone else. Submission would be the only option. But both plans paled in comparison to what Kushner was envisioning. His plan wasn't about controlling countries or regions. It was about controlling the future itself. In a post-Samson world, traditional governments would be replaced by corporate structures. Nation-states would give way to economic zones managed by those with the technological expertise to maintain some semblance of civilization. And at the center of it all would be Kushner's network of real estate holdings, financial institutions, and technology companies. A shadow infrastructure ready to emerge as the new global government when the old system collapsed. The beauty of his plan was its simplicity. He wouldn't need to use Project Samson to destroy civilization, he would just need to threaten to use it. The mere existence of such a weapon, combined with credible evidence that he controlled it, would be enough to reshape the world according to his vision. But there was one person who could stop him, one person who had been watching from the shadows, gathering evidence, preparing for the moment when the truth would need to come out. That person was closer to all three men than anyone suspected. Someone who had access to their private conversations, their secret meetings, their most sensitive documents, someone whose loyalty had never been questioned because their position seemed so innocuous, so beneath suspicion. Melania Trump. The former First Lady wasn't the passive observer that public perception suggested. Her background in Eastern Europe had given her connections and insights that none of the men appreciated. Her apparent disinterest in politics was a carefully maintained facade that allowed her unprecedented access to information. She had been documenting everything. Every conversation, every meeting, every document that passed through Mar-a-Lago. Not out of patriotism or moral conviction, but out of pure survival instinct. She understood that in the world these men were creating, even she would become expendable. The night that Trump and Netanyahu met in the bunker, Melania was 47 feet above them. In her private quarters, uploading encrypted files to servers in countries that don't extradite to the United States. Insurance policies against the three most dangerous men in her life. Because she had learned something that terrified her more than Project Samson itself. The weapon was already complete. Not in some hidden facility in Venezuela or North Korea, but right there beneath Mar-a-Lago. The construction had been finished months ago. What the three men were really fighting over wasn't control of a future weapon. It was control of an active nuclear device capable of destroying civilization at any moment. The electromagnetic pulse generator was housed in a chamber directly beneath the main dining room where Trump hosted world leaders and celebrities. Every dinner party, every diplomatic reception, every casual gathering was taking place directly above a weapon that could end the modern world. But the most terrifying revelation was yet to come. The weapon wasn't designed to be controlled by any of them. The activation system required biometric confirmation from all three, Trump, Netanyahu, and Kushner. It was a nuclear deadman switch that ensured none of them could betray the others without risking their own destruction. Or so they thought. What none of them knew was that there was a fourth biometric signature already programmed into the system. A signature that belonged to someone who had been present during every phase of construction, every crucial meeting, every important decision. Mohammed bin Salman had built a backdoor into Project Samson that would allow him to activate the weapon regardless of what the other three decided. While they were fighting over control, he already possessed it. The Crown Prince's plan was more audacious than anything Trump, Netanyahu, or Kushner had imagined. He wasn't interested in controlling existing power structures. He intended to eliminate them entirely. Project Samson would create a global dark age that would last long enough for a new civilization to emerge with Saudi Arabia as its sole technological and energy powerhouse. In a world without electricity, without computers, without modern infrastructure, oil would once again become the foundation of human civilization, and Saudi Arabia would be the only nation with both the energy resources and the preserved technology to But there was still one more twist in this nightmare scenario. The Crown Prince had made the same mistake as everyone else involved in Project Samson. He had underestimated the one person who truly understood what they were building and why it had to be stopped. Dr. Mordechai Vanunu, the supposedly silenced nuclear whistleblower, had been playing a deeper game than anyone realized. His apparent cooperation with Israeli intelligence was a cover for something far more significant. He had been systematically sabotaging Project Samson from within. Every technical specification he provided included subtle flaws. Every component he helped design contained hidden vulnerabilities. While the four men fought over control of what they believed was an ultimate weapon, Vanunu had been ensuring that any attempt to use it would result in the weapon destroying itself. The electromagnetic pulse would last exactly 47 seconds. Long enough to cause massive disruption, but not long enough to permanently cripple global civilization. The nuclear component would fail to achieve critical mass, resulting in radiological contamination limited to the immediate area around Mar-a-Lago. In other words, if anyone tried to use Project Samson, the primary casualties would be whoever activated it. Vanunu had turned their ultimate weapon into their ultimate trap. But he couldn't simply reveal this publicly without triggering a global crisis that would destabilize the very civilization he was trying to protect. Instead, he had been feeding carefully selected information to intelligence agencies around the world, building a case that would eventually bring down all four conspirators simultaneously. That case was now complete, as Trump and Netanyahu continued their clandestine meetings, as Kushner expanded his shadow network, as the Crown Prince prepared for global reset. Intelligence agencies on every continent were preparing coordinated arrests that would expose Project Samson and neutralize its threat forever. But Vanunu had built in one final safeguard. If the arrests failed, if any of the conspirators managed to escape justice, if Project Samson remained a threat to global security, there was a fifth biometric signature programmed into the weapon's activation system. A signature that would trigger the device's self-destruction protocol, neutralizing the weapon but also eliminating everyone within a 5-mile radius of Mar-a-Lago. Vanunu's signature. The man who had sacrificed his freedom to expose nuclear proliferation in the 1980s was prepared to sacrifice his life to stop it in the 2020s. Project Samson would die with its creators, ensuring that their vision of controlled apocalypse would become their own personal ending. As dawn broke over Mar-a-Lago that final morning, none of the four conspirators knew that their nightmare was about to end. FBI agents were already in position around the perimeter. International arrest warrants had been signed. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable, catastrophic for everyone involved. But the most poetic justice was reserved for the underground bunker where it all began. When the agents finally breached that hidden chamber 47 feet below ground, they found it empty except for a single note left by Vanunu. It contained just 5 words that explained everything. Some secrets destroy their keepers. The nuclear secret that Trump and Netanyahu thought would make them gods had instead revealed them as the flawed, dangerous men they had always been. Their hunger for ultimate power had led them into a trap designed by someone who understood that the greatest threat to humanity often comes from those who believe they are its saviors. Project Samson was real. The weapon was real. The conspiracy was real. But in the end, the only thing that was truly destroyed was the illusion that any human being should possess the power to end civilization at will. The underground bunker beneath Mar-a-Lago now sits empty, its electromagnetic shielding and air filtration systems serving no purpose except as monuments to the madness of unchecked ambition. The weapon that could have ended the world instead ended the careers and freedom of those who built it. And somewhere, in a location known only to international intelligence agencies, Dr. Mordecai Vanunu continues his lifelong mission, ensuring that nuclear weapons remain tools of deterrence, rather than instruments of absolute power. The secret that Netanyahu and Trump thought they were hiding has become the secret that exposed them both. Their visits to private clubs, their clandestine meetings, their nuclear conspiracy, all of it documented, all of it revealed, all of it serving as a warning to any future leaders who might confuse power with wisdom. Because in the end, the most terrifying truth about Project Samson wasn't what it could do to the world. It was what the pursuit of such power did to the men who sought it. It revealed them not as leaders or visionaries, but as cautionary tales about the corruption that comes with believing you have the right to decide humanity's fate. The nuclear secret they both hid, it was that they were never worthy of keeping it. But there's one final twist that even Vanunu didn't anticipate. 3 months after the arrests, as the world celebrated the end of the Project Samson threat, a new intelligence report landed on the desks of every major world leader. It contained a single terrifying revelation. The Turku facility at Mar-a-Lago was just one of 7 identical installations. The other 6 remain active, hidden beneath seemingly innocent locations around the globe, their existence known only to a shadow network of financiers and technicians, who learned from the mistakes that brought down Trump, Netanyahu, Kushner, and the Crown Prince. The nuclear secret isn't over, it's just found new keepers. And this time they're not making the same mistakes their predecessors made. They're not meeting in person, they're not trusting family members, they're not leaving paper trails. They're waiting, watching, learning from the downfall of Project Samson to build something even more dangerous. Because sometimes the greatest threat isn't the secret you uncover, it's the one that remains hidden while you're celebrating your victory over the last one. The intelligence report included coordinates. 6 locations that would make your blood run cold. Beneath the Vatican's ancient foundations, under Beijing's financial district, buried beneath Moscow's Red Square, hidden under London's Parliament, concealed beneath the Louvre in Paris, and most chillingly, constructed beneath the United Nations headquarters in New York. Each facility was more sophisticated than Mar-a-Lago. Each contained weapons that made Project Samson look primitive, and each was controlled by individuals whose names would shock the world. People trusted with humanity's suras, who had secretly decided to hold it hostage. The Vatican installation was overseen by a cardinal whose public devotion to peace masked private conversations about divine intervention through technological means. The Beijing facility answered to a tech billionaire whose humanitarian foundation was actually a front for weapons research. Moscow's bunker was controlled by an oligarch who publicly opposed Putin while secretly planning his replacement. But the most disturbing revelation came from the New York facility. The person controlling weapons of mass destruction beneath the UN building? Someone whose job was supposed to prevent global conflict, not enable it. The Secretary General himself had been compromised, recruited into this shadow network through a combination of blackmail and promises of power in a post-apocalyptic world order. Every peace treaty he negotiated, every humanitarian mission he authorized, every speech about global cooperation, all of it was theater designed to maintain stability while the real power structure prepared for its emergence. Dr. Vanunu had suspected the existence of these additional facilities, but even he couldn't have imagined the scope of infiltration. The shadow network wasn't just building weapons, it was positioning its members at the highest levels of global governance, ensuring that when the time came to reveal their power, resistance would be impossible. As intelligence agencies worldwide scrambled to investigate these new threats, one thing became terrifyingly clear: the arrest of Trump, Netanyahu, Kushner, and the Crown Prince hadn't ended the nuclear conspiracy. It had simply eliminated the amateur players, leaving the true professionals free to perfect their plans without interference from ego-driven amateurs. The nuclear secret continues to evolve, hidden beneath the very institutions we trust to protect us from such threats.